Welcome, Bayou Blitz family, to episode number 2 of the 2022 Bayou Blitz podcast. I am Bob Rose. I am a contributing writer for SI.com, Fan Nation, and most importantly, Saints News Network. I am joined by my good friend, my partner in crime, and my co-host, Brendan Boylan. How are you tonight, Brendan?
I'm doing good. Process of moving, so I don't have the cool backdrop like you do, but we'll have that set up for the next show. Just excited. We got a lot of Saints stuff to talk about. Obviously, the guys reported today. Football's back. We have some big breaking news, some things to speculate on. But it's just that time of year, Bob. Football is officially back. Our guy John Hendricks was down there in Metairie today, and we got all the cool updates and inside info. So everything's good. Everything's going a little bit back to normal. And fans are going to be back this week too. So it's going to feel like training camp once again.
Yeah, and I love this time of year because it's still summer. I'm a beach bum at heart. Anybody that knows me will relay that information for sure. But it's so exciting to have football back. Yeah, the games don't count yet, but you feel a lot of excitement around this team and around this franchise. Correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't really feel that kind of excitement the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Saints were a talented team. Yeah, they had high expectations. There was a lot of nervousness about and anxiety around replacing Drew Brees coming into last camp. The camp before, the questions were circulating. Is this the last run with Brees? Everything like that. Are the Saints still talented enough to win the Super Bowl? Now everything is literally up in the air. This is just It's such an exciting time of year to be an NFL fan, period. But to be a fan of such a talented team, with so much greatness at their toes, at their fingertips. That's what makes what we do as a living very, very fun.
Well, I think to add on to what you were saying about the last 2 years, and this might be a really bad analogy, but bear with me, is last season, first year without Drew, you still had Sean. So it was almost like, you know what, you and a girl take a break, but you're not broken up yet, right? But now Sean's gone. It's completely over. You got to rebuild. You got to start over completely. And I think that is making it feel a different way as well, because it's a complete, I won't say rebuild, but for lack of a better term, you're building from the ground up now. Everything that's been in your DNA and that you've known for the last 16 years is starting to move on. You still have little pieces of that DNA, obviously, with Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael, and guys that have been in the building, Cam Jordans, the Mark Ingrams. But this is something brand new from top to bottom for us, the writers, for the fans, for the team itself. First head coach in 16 years. That's not Sean Payton. Second year without Drew Brees. So there's a lot of excitement. It's nervous energy because you don't really know, but you add some of the big names and some of those splash signings in free agency that the Saints don't typically have, right? You add that all into the mix and you have a really nervy but exciting and fun and energetic big pot of gumbo heading into training camp.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I mean, expectations are all over the place. About 99% of the national media, has the Saints finishing with a below 500 record and or missing the playoffs. You have a portion of the Saints fan base, especially after the signings of LSU products, Jarvis Landry and Tyrann Mathieu. You have some of these people saying this team is going to go 15-2, and roll through the playoffs. The reality is definitely somewhere in between. I personally think that this is not only a legitimate contender for the NFC South Championship, I think this is a legitimate contender for the NFC Championship and a berth in the Super Bowl. But there are a whole lot of what ifs that could go right or wrong with this team. What are your early expectations of the New Orleans Saints this season?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and you kind of got to start here, so I'm going to respond to your question with the biggest news of the day, is the fact that we heard today that Michael Thomas is activated off the PUP list. He's officially back in practice, though he didn't go through full team drills, according to our very own John Hendricks, the Saints News Network. He was a full go everywhere else. I think that's got to increase the excitement and your expectations for the team, because you and I, who have a little bit more insight than the people listening and watching, didn't expect Thomas to be back until, I don't know, a quarter, maybe even halfway through camp. We really didn't know where he was in this process. I know for you might even had him maybe sometime next week, but we really didn't know. And it was even brought up in interviews with him today. It was the first time he'd spoke to the media in almost 2 full years. We didn't know anything about Michael Thomas. We all assumed that Mike's going to be back. I wrote a fantasy article about him, not sure if he's going to be able to return to form. But the fact that he is back, and this isn't a situation where, he went pretty silent on social media for a little bit. You didn't really have any new workout videos. You didn't really know what was going on. The fact that you're seeing him in full pads, he's catching passes, he's running routes, he's still the crispest route runner in all of football, if you ask me, and you're seeing all that, that's exciting. That's huge news. So that's got to raise the expectation levels, not extremely, but personally, I know what you're talking about. You see some of those guys in the national media that have the Saints at 9-8. That sounds weird to say still. I'm still not used to that.
Yeah.
I want to say 9-7. You have them somewhere floating around 500. Personally, I'm going to say about the same expectations I had for the team last year. 11-12 wins in the regular season. Obviously, there's some new pieces, really important new pieces. And you look at the back end of the secondary, 2 completely new safeties. There's going to be lapses. There's going to be early mistakes made, right, that may cost you a ball game. But I still think that this is one of the more talented rosters on paper heading into training camp. And I still don't think Jameis Winston is getting enough credit and love from people because he did have an injury-shortened season last year. But in what I don't even think is a small sample size, almost half a season worth, like 6 games and a quarter worth a sample size, was playing the best football of his career. That was without Michael Thomas. That was without now Jarvis Landry and Chris Olave, Mark Ingram, et cetera, et cetera. Offensively, I think the Saints are really talented. Defensively, they made some big splashes with Tyrann Mathieu. They still have the DNA of Demario Davis, Cameron Jordan, got guys like Davenport and Turner coming back healthy. I don't see why this team can't do what you said in terms of compete for the NFC and potentially make a deep run to the Super Bowl. That's the expectation, but I don't expect this team to go 15-2, undefeated, and just steamroll through all of it. I don't expect them to be terrible either. I expect them to be essentially where they've been each of the last 5 to 7 years.
And the talent on paper certainly should bear that out. But folks, what Brendan and I are basically saying is, temper your enthusiasm just a little bit. Not only with the team in general, but Michael Thomas. I didn't personally expect Thomas to be practicing at all until beginning and middle of next week. And it wouldn't have surprised me. I sort of expected him to even sit out the first preseason game. In other words, I figured that Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael and the coaching staff and the medical staff would be easing Thomas back into it. So like Brendan said, it was a surprise to us all, even the reporters on site, when Michael Thomas trotted out for practice in pads and helmet. But they're going to go easy on him. Mainly because you don't know how that ankle is going to respond until he is a full go in game conditions. And you certainly don't want to test that too early and potentially put him in an opportunity where he's going to have a setback. Because this team needs Michael Thomas. Yeah, I know they brought in Jarvis Landry. Yeah, I know they drafted Chris Olave, and I expect terrific things from both of them. But the alpha male of this receiving core is still Michael Thomas. There is no question about it. I don't know, just as Brendan has said and written, we don't know if we're going to get 2019 Michael Thomas back, but even a 2020 Michael Thomas on a hobbled wheel, basically a shell of himself, was still leaps and bounds better than the average receiver in the NFL. And if we could get somewhere between that 2020 Michael Thomas and 2019 Michael Thomas, then this offense is going to be darn good. And like you just said, Donald Woods, you got to take it day by day with not only Thomas, but the other injured players, that are rehabbing or coming back, especially on offense. This team is going to be defensive driven. There's no question about it, because their front seven, the line rotation and linebackers is as good as or better than any in the NFL. The cornerbacks are as good as or better than any in the NFL. The safety crew is an athletic upgrade, in my opinion, over Marcus Williams and Malcolm Jenkins from last year. But Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May aren't used to playing with those cornerbacks in front of them, aren't used to playing with each other. So like Brendan pointed out, like I've said several times, there's going to be lapses in coverage early in the season. You hope it doesn't come at critical times and or that it comes at a time where the defense can overcome it. But the defense is going to have to carry this team while the offense gets used to each other. Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas have played together for exactly 2 quarters of their career. Olave and Jameis, never. Landry and Jameis, never. And like you pointed out, Brendan, we got half a season from Jameis Winston, and I personally think that he was just hitting his stride and comfort level in this offense when he went down with injury. But at that offense that he had to work with last year, they didn't have any of those 3 top receivers. I love Deontay, and I really like Marquez Callaway, but they're more suited to be complementary weapons than featured receivers. You had Alvin Kamara dealing with an on-again, off-again knee injury, and Mark Ingram wasn't even in the lineup before Jameis went down. Again, all of 2 quarters that they played together. So it's going to take some time for this offense to gel, and I do expect it sooner rather than later. That's what training camp and reps and meetings are for. But until that happens, this is going to be a defense-driven team with some perhaps ugly games early in the season.
I think you hit it on the head. Another big part of training camp news was the fact that Taysom Hill is no longer a quarterback. Something that we've known for a little bit, and if you've been keeping up with the offseason, you know that the plan is to bring Taysom back to his go-go gadget type of role or Swiss Army knife type of role. And good reports today of him running routes, catching the ball well. He looks to be fully healthy. Remember, had that foot injury last year, pretty remarkable. He played as well as he did at times with the injury that he had. So with Taysom Hill moving to that tight end spot, I know that is a part of the roster that really concerns you, Bob. Do you feel any more comfort that Taysom Hill is going to be in that tight end room full time? And what are your expectations here early, only the first day of training camp, for Taysom Hill?
If Taysom Hill is healthy, and again, he's dealing with that Liz Frank injury, that foot injury. So you got to keep your fingers crossed to see how he develops. But I love the fact that Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael plan on using Hill's versatility and athleticism in the offense, perhaps more so than what Sean Payton did, especially in the last 2 years. It drove me crazy. I never believed in Taysom Hill as a quarterback. I said that from day one. But it drove me crazy that when we would see Taysom standing beside Coach Payton on the sidelines in big situations, mainly because Taysom, and we did come to find out last season especially that Taysom was dealing with that foot injury and what turned out to be all year long. But Sean was like, Coach Payton was trying to have Taysom the last 2 years digest the offense as a quarterback. My coaching philosophy is you have your best athletes out onto the field. Taysom Hill is one of your best athletes. So I do love the fact that they at least plan and are saying that they're going to use him in multiple ways. Do I believe he's going to be a big jolt to the tight end position, though? No, I don't. And certainly not this year, mainly because of his makeup as an athlete. And his training as an athlete. It's just not as a traditional tight end at this point in time. Yeah, he'll be used at the position and what they call a move tight end, or to borrow an old term, an H-back, sort of off the line of scrimmage, in motion, maybe as a crackback blocker, perhaps even out of the backfield as a blocker or receiver, definitely out of the backfield as a runner, and out of the slot as a receiver. In other words, Pete Carmichael is going to try to utilize Taysom Hill's best attributes, which is his athleticism and versatility, in space. So you're not going to see him come off of the line like you would an Adam Troutman, a Jared Cook, a Ben Watson. Those are more traditional tight end roles. And that's not what Taysom Hill is. Certainly won't be what he is in 2022. Whatever you get from the tight end position has got to come from Adam Troutman, Jaleel Johnson, who I'm high on, and either Nick Van Nett, or if an undrafted rookie like a Lucas Krull pops up. The tight end production, the traditional tight end production, has got to come from one of those 3 or 4 guys. Taysom Hill is going to be your usual Swiss Army knife.
I'm glad you said H-back, which is a term that's not thrown around as much as it used to, but that is a perfect role for Taysom Hill in being able to do a multitude of different things. And I think he still will see snaps at the quarterback spot in a little bit of a wildcat formation, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to be creative and it's going to be fun. That's one thing that I think Taysom Hill brings to the offense is, he might not be your every down traditional quarterback. And so what Bob said, and, Bob never had faith in Taysom. I had a little bit of faith in Taysom, maybe a little bit more than Bob, but quickly recognized, hey, he's going to be a fun, he's the perfect Madden player, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right, because he's got ridiculous arm strength. He runs around, but that's what he needs to be, not just in the video game, but for the Saints as well. It's 3rd and 2 when you want to get a little crazy, let's do it, because you got Taysom Hill. And I think he's going to excel in that role even at his age. That's something a lot of people don't talk about either.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, going to BYU, he went on his, mission for his religious purposes, then went to BYU, had all the injuries, and it was almost like a Brandon Whedon type of situation where when he ended up finding himself in the league, he was already a veteran in terms of the age. So he's up in his 30s. He's got some foot issues and different injuries. Obviously, I talked about the ACLs. He was dealing with the foot last year. Doesn't take away from his athletic ability, but putting him in a role as an H-back, if you will, you don't know how much tread's left on that tire, how much gas is left in the tank. So you might as well use it while you have it.
Not only that, Brendan, but he's learning a whole new position. I've always admired Taysom Hill for his football IQ also. People don't realize how difficult it is to play so many different positions. I'm not going to say master them, because master would imply that he's a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, and he's not. But he is a very good runner. The fact that he did what he did as a quarterback, with having to cross-train at so many other positions, that in itself is impressive. As a running back, that is probably the easiest position in football to master, because a lot of it is just predicated off natural ability, but you still got to read blocks. You still got to set up blocks. You still have to read defenses and recognize your cutback lanes. And in 2019. In 2019, the production that he had as a receiver over the second half of that year, that's what made me realize, I'm like, this kid is a football player, and not just a stereotypical jock where you just strap it on and coach tells you to go run through a wall, and you don't even ask why you do it. This kid is a student of the game, and that's why I have the utmost confidence that he'll perform well in this role, but folks, it's going to take time for him to learn it.
I'm glad you brought up 2019, because remember, after that back half of the season, there was a serious push for Taysom Hill to be listed as a tight end in fantasy football, and he got it. And then it came back to bite fantasy football in the butt, because when he became the starting quarterback last season for the first game, or 2 years ago, when Drew went out, you could play him at tight end, although he was the starting quarterback for the Saints. So for a lot of people, you were able to essentially play 2 quarterbacks. That was a whole mess in itself. But no, I think Taysom's definitely shown what he can do for the offense, and he does serve as another threat. I mean, we talked about it the last podcast. If you have healthy Mike Thomas on one side, Then you got Jarvis Landry. Then you got Olave. Then you got Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara in a 5-wide set. I mean, that's really hard for defenses to have to cover, because you putting a linebacker on Kamara, you putting a linebacker on Taysom Hill. Do you dare put a linebacker on one of those 3 receivers? It's going to be fun to see how Pete Carmichael gets creative with using Taysom Hill, because over the years, it really has been Sean Payton who got creative using Taysom Hill. So what can Carmichael do to put his own little seasoning on that and create something that's similar yet different? Donald wants to know, Bob, because this is a new player for the New Orleans Saints, picked him up the other day. What are your thoughts on running back Malcolm Brown? We have to say, because remember, we had defensive tackle Malcolm Brown suit up for the Saints a few years ago.
And it was funny. I was writing for Canal Street Chronicles when the Saints signed Malcolm Brown minus the L a few years ago, and I did the write up on it, on the breaking news piece, etc. And then I attempted to tag the player on Twitter to congratulate him. Well, what I didn't realize until he responded was that I ended up tagging Malcolm with an L Brown, the running back, and he playfully jabbed back at me. He goes, "Thanks, man." He goes, "But I think you got the wrong guy." ... I'll take his money though. But it's that tells me that the guy at least had a sense of humor about it. But listen, Malcolm Brown, the running back, go 5'11", 225. He's a bowling ball. He's a between the tackles runner. Most of his success came with the Rams from 2015 to 2020. That's probably how most Saints fans remember him. Played his college ball at Texas, where he was an underrated back there. He's been a complimentary back most of his career. Only has around 1,300 yards rushing. Isn't much of a receiver out of the backfield. A total of 46 receptions, and is coming off of a leg injury with the Dolphins last year that cut his season to about 7 games. I have confidence that he's bounced back from that knee injury, but we're not talking about a Pro Bowl pedigree running back coming in here. But he's a younger guy without a lot of tread on his tires. And I think that's what's important to remember. I realize that people are terrified about an Alvin Kamara suspension. I mean, I am too. It's inevitably going to happen. It's not going to happen to start the season. It would be a shocker at this point. But when it happens, people are afraid that the Saints don't have the running back horses or the running backs that are there. Well, who's going to catch passes out of the backfield when Kamara is suspended or when Kamara takes a breather? The answer, folks, is nobody. Because the Saints don't need running backs to do that. Outside of Kamara is the finest receiving back in the league today, and maybe one of the finest in NFL history. But he's a rare breed. He has rare abilities. Mark Ingram is a very, very good screen pass running back and check down guy. But those other guys, all you need them to do is provide a legitimate threat between the tackles. You have your receivers. Yeah, you have it. Yeah, if Taysom Hill develops, you have him. You have Michael Thomas, Olave, Landry, Deontay, Callaway. You have those guys to throw the ball to. What the Saints need is somebody to provide a legitimate rushing threat between the tackles, to set up play action, and to force the defenses to play run and pass honestly, rather than cheat an extra guy outside of the box, or by contrast in the box, because they don't respect either the rushing or the passing game. That's what Malcolm Brown could provide, and I think at the very least he's going to provide competition for Abram Smith, Divine Ezigbo, and Tony Jones. Competition is only iron sharpens iron, as the saying goes. Competition is only going to make them better. But this is the back that the Saints, the type of back that the Saints are looking for right now. What Malcolm Brown could provide. They brought Jordan Howard in for a tryout on Tuesday, and even though they haven't signed him yet, at least to any of our knowledge, he is a similar type of back. He's a between the tackles guy. When they brought in Sony Michel a couple of months back, he's a between the tackles guy. That's the kind of running back that the Saints are looking for right now, to provide depth and a complement to Alvin Kamara if and when he gets suspended.
I'll make 2 points to everything that you just said. The first being the one thing people have to remember, because as much as I have loved covering Mark Ingram over the years, this is probably it. This is probably the last year. It's the last year of his deal. And let's face it, Mark's not getting any younger, unfortunately. He's not the same Mark Ingram he was back in 15, right? And so trying to go ahead and find a guy that you might be able to stash, for lack of a better term, a guy like Jones Jr., who had a great preseason last year, is going to be crucial for the Saints moving forward, because you have seen, and I have seen, and the people watching and listening have seen how much more productive Alvin Kamara is when he doesn't have to take the bulk of everything.
Yes, sir.
Right? You don't need a split 50-50 like that first few years of boom and zoom. But when you have a guy who can make it not quite 60-40, let's say 70-30, it definitely helps Kamara out, and you need to find that. And the second thing is you look back at the history of Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints and this hybrid type of running back that catches out of the backfield, right? I mean, the first one that pops in your mind is one of the most underrated players in New Orleans Saints history, in Pierre Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Then you go to the Reggie Bushes, and you go to the Darren Sproleses, and then you go to the Tavares Cadets of the world and the Marcus Murphys and what have you. And there was a very specific role, right? Even Boston Scott, who didn't end up making the team, has had a good little stretch with the Philadelphia Eagles. There was a mold of running back for Sean Payton. Well,
yeah, and even when Darren Sproles was traded, he tried to fill that role, with CJ injury list filler. I mean, CJ Spiller. I'm sorry, I had to throw that in. And one of my most hated Saints players of all time.
Really? Oh man, maybe it's because I'm I live in the Carolinas, and he's like a hero right down the street. But CJ, you can ask a lot of Clemson people. This is completely off topic. Ask a lot of Clemson people who changed Clemson football, and the real people will tell you it wasn't the quarterbacks, it wasn't Deshaun Watson, it wasn't Sammy Watkins. It was CJ Spiller was the guy that really re-put them on the map down there. So I have a little bit of a different love for CJ in that sense. And
if you're a college football fan or a Clemson fan, I could see why. I mean, I remember him at Clemson, and he was a true game breaker. He was a Reggie Bush type of player in college. He had a solid career at Buffalo, and then he got to New Orleans, and as someone, the pod people took over his body. And ever since then, like I said, he wasn't CJ Spiller. He was CJ injury list filler.
Well, the one thing that people can remember CJ for, the only highlight of his Saints time, right, against Dallas, that number 400 for Drew. That was really cool.
Yes.
That was really cool to be able to have it go off that way. Nonetheless, going way back, there was a specific breed of running backs that the Saints wanted. And now that Sean has moved on, and now that the Saints have a superstar at the running back position, you don't really need that type of breed anymore. To exactly what you said, because this is the first thing I thought when you said, well, you don't need that anymore. Well, opposed to putting Kamara in the slot, you can put Deontay Hardy in the slot, who is the same size as like a Darren Sproles, who has lightning quick feet, great hands, and it really showed development at the receiver spot. You can get really creative. We talked about Taysom Hill being an H-back type of player. There's a lot of things you can do, and I think a lot of Saints fans that have been woven into the idea that you need this hybrid type of back are still there. And trust me, Bob, you can vouch, I really wanted the Saints to go grab Sony Michel, because what he could also do out of the backfield. Yes, he's great in between the tackles, but he also has good hands. He showed that with the Patriots. He showed that with the Rams. He showed that way back at the University of Georgia as well. I wanted a guy like that. But understand now what the Saints are trying to do and find that running back room. I don't know if Brown's going to make the final roster. But like you said, iron sharpens iron. If it's a camp body, it is a heck of a camp body, a great veteran find. And remember, they brought in another veteran as well who caught the ball well, ran between the tackles as well, though it hasn't been lately. In David Johnson, 2,000-yard season. Remember that? That feels like forever ago. Yeah. But again, those are the type of players they're bringing in to compete. So I think this is a great move for New Orleans moving forward. Go through the comments a little bit. Darren Sproles is very good. Yes. Mm-hmm. Bob, promise me it live on the air right now this offseason. You and I will have a whole podcast on the 2011 Saints, because that is our favorite Saints team outside of the Super Bowl year. And honestly, it might be my favorite Saints team ever. I know they didn't end up with the ring at the end of it, but man, they were fun to watch. Tavares Cadet.
2011 Saints were my favorite Saints team of all time, and I love those Dome Patrol teams. I love the 2009 team. I love the 2006 team, because it just they held a special place in your heart. The 2018 season was an extremely fun season too. But if I were to have to answer a poll, 2011 Saints were my favorite Saints team of all time, and. They didn't win the Super Bowl, but I think you put that 2011 team on the field with that 2009 team. I think 2011 beats them.
I do too. So yes, we're going to do an entire podcast on the 11 team because it's the off season, and at some point we're going to have time to do it. But that'll be a lot of fun. No, but the Saints had so many great receiving backs, but I think it's time to kind of put that in the back burners. For New Orleans. Let's talk about the defense a little bit. Big news coming into training camp that had some people concerned, but, at the end of the day, Twitter kind of caught up with itself and let people know it's not as big of a deal as people may have thought. But that news being this: Tyrann Mathieu has been excused from the first few days of training camp to take care of some personal family issues. I know a lot of people were very excited to see Mathieu in the black and gold at training camp and kind of get this thing going. Obviously, life happens, and different things call for all of us to take care of different personal matters. But with that said, what are you looking forward to, and what are your expectations in training camp of Tyrann Mathieu? Big voice, big personality, lots of respect across the league. What do you want to see him implement in his first week, whenever that is, of Saints training camp?
Well, first of all, to address the fact that he was excused from practice, yes, it is for family issues. We don't know anything more than that. And Dennis Allen went out of his way yesterday to say it is nothing serious. So folks, again, reel it in a little bit, between Tyrann, we don't know what's going on at home, but we were told it's nothing serious. You have players on the PUP list, on the PUP list, on the non-football injury list. Guys, this is absolutely normal for veterans early in training camp. A lot of times they might be a little bit out of shape. And more often than not, and this is the case with all the Saints on the NFI list or PUP list, they're just rehabbing injuries, and the coaching staff and medical staff wants to bring them back slowly. That's all this is. And there's not, knock on wood, there's not an ounce of severity to anything as far as that goes right now. And let's hope it continues, of course. As far as what I expect from Mathieu, in the locker room and in the huddle, I expect him to be a similar voice to what Malcolm Jenkins was. And Malcolm Jenkins was such a vital leader for that young secondary, which has since come of age, but you still always need a leader of the unit. Not just the entire defensive squad. We know those voices are Cam Jordan, Demario Davis especially, but each specific unit needs a voice too. And that's not something that this secondary had before Malcolm Jenkins came back. And now that he's gone, that was a void to fill. But Tyrann Mathieu is exactly the type of personality to fill it. On the field is a little bit different story. I think Matthew is a massive athletic upgrade over Malcolm Jenkins. He can do so much more on a football field than what Jenkins really ever could, but especially of what Jenkins could when he came back to New Orleans, when he was sort of on the tail end of his career. No disrespect to Malcolm, because I love what he did as a Saint, and he developed his all-around game with the Philadelphia Eagles. Tyrann Mathieu just gives you an athletic upgrade for sure. But reps are so important for both he and Marcus May in that secondary, early and throughout preseason and training camp. Because if you guys remember when Malcolm Jenkins first came back to New Orleans, early in the year, the Saints had at least a handful of pass defense breakdowns, coverage breakdowns early in the year before they solidified themselves. Once they did over the last year and a half, they have been right up there with the best pass defenses in the NFL. So you worry about what kind of communication breakdowns or issues are there going to be between Matthew, May, and the rest of that secondary. Not only what they're going to be, but how long they're going to last. That's why reps through the preseason is extremely important. Once the communication and chemistry gets evened out, Donald Woods. I love Justin Evans too. I think he could be have a real say so in the final roster of this team. As we said at the onset of the show, this team needs to be defensive led early on. So you need to be solidified at all three levels of your defense. That's why reps are so vital for this secondary early on, because you don't know how important it is for a cornerback to have confidence in the safety and deep support behind them. That's what has allowed Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, and 2 years ago, Janoris Jenkins. That's what has allowed them to be so aggressive in their underneath coverage. That's their makeup. That's their mentality. And that's the way Dennis Allen, Chris Richard want them to play. But you need to have confidence in that deep support on your back end.
I'm glad you brought up May a few times because I feel a little bad for the guy. Very productive, was arguably right there with Marcus Williams, the top free safety in all of free agency, and the Saints were able to essentially swap them for each other. And that signing has got extremely overshadowed because of Tyrann Mathieu, right? Who arguably is the best safety in football. He's making his return home. All the great storylines that come with that. We forget that Marcus May is a football player. He's extremely versatile and maybe even be a little bit more versatile than Marcus Williams was at the free safety spot. For the people who don't know, tell us a little bit about what you've seen on tape of Marcus May and what he's going to bring to this New Orleans Saints defense.
I love you LSU fans, but I'm a Florida Gators guy. They're my favorite team in the SEC, and next to Penn State, my favorite college football team. So I've watched Marcus May through his college days. And Brendan, you're absolutely right. He gives you the same kind of range as Marcus Williams did. He is the same kind of ball hawk, has those same kind of ball skills that Marcus Williams did. But the difference between Marcus Williams and Marcus May is this. You didn't want to see Marcus Williams often move into slot coverage. You never wanted to see Marcus Williams move up into the box as a hybrid linebacker and in the box kind of safety guy. Dennis Allen would do that on occasion, but he would avoid it whenever possible. And he had that luxury because he had Von Bell and then Marcus Jenkins to be able to do that. Well, Saints fans, you already know what Tyrann Mathieu can do. Marcus May is that exact same kind of player, only younger. Marcus May can move into the slot and legitimately take on a team's third or fourth receiver. Marcus May, he's not as good in the box as Malcolm Jenkins was. He's not quite as good in the box as Tyrann Mathieu is, but you can feel secure when you move Marcus May up into the tackle box as an extra safety. He's a better tackler than Marcus Williams. He takes better angles. He's more aggressive, and he's more fundamentally sound as a tackler. Marcus Williams probably had a little bit better. It was a little bit better instinctive player as a deep single high free safety, but May can do that as well. That's where you get a little bit of a drop off. So it's kind of pushed. They're very similar players, but I like the versatility that Marcus May brings over what Marcus Williams gave to the defense.
Well, with the last 15 to 20 minutes, these are the things I want to talk about. I want to talk about some of those position battles. We've talked about some players to watch. Let's talk some position battles. But before we get into that, we talked about some of the expectations for the team going into the regular season. But here in training camp, first-year head coach for the Saints, at least, Dennis Allen, right? Second-year Jameis Winston. It's going to be first-year Landry, first-year Olave. Shoot, you might as well say it's first year with this quarterback and for Mike Thomas, because it really is. You said it earlier, only 2 quarters. Have a brand new left tackle. Defensively, we talked about the pieces that they've added. Brand new on the back end of the secondary. You have a young Paulson Adebo. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? So what are our expectations for the Saints in training camp and into the preseason? And what are some things that you want to see, not just from what you see on the field in training camp, but some of the things you see in these pressers? We've already seen Jameis Winston and Mike Thomas talk to the media today.
I tell you, this has the potential to be a really fun team. You could tell these guys like each other a lot. There's a lot of camaraderie. And as far as Michael Thomas goes, and you saw it in his press conferences and interviews today, Mike Thomas looks like he has a massive chip on his shoulder right now, which has to thrill Dennis Allen and Mickey Loomis and Jameis Winston no end, because an angry Michael Thomas is an impossible to defend Michael Thomas. He still has a chip on his. Michael Thomas believes that he should have been a first-round draft choice out of Ohio State in 2016. And he was very, very vocal about that within his first couple years. In other words, he played like a guy with a chip on his shoulder. And I'm not saying that's why he had the stats that he did, but he's always been an athlete that just plays with that extra edge. He looks like he has that right now. And as long as that ankle, knock on wood, is cooperative, I think the Saints are going to get a monstrous year out of Michael Thomas, because the type of routes that he runs, the type of physicality he brings to the position, that is the perfect security blanket for Jameis Winston. Jameis loved going to Mike. Mike Evans was his favorite receiver in Tampa Bay. And Mike Evans is a physical receiver with a similar skill set to Michael Thomas, except Michael Thomas is 3 times the receiver that Mike Evans is. Yeah, I said it, and I'll keep saying it. I'll die on that hill. Michael Thomas and Jameis Winston is going to be a combination to watch. Jarvis Landry, we know, is a worker, and he's going to challenge everybody else in that receiving room. And we know Michael Thomas is too. They're going to challenge everybody else in that receiving room to keep up with the pace that they set. Jameis Winston is challenged by those receivers. Those receivers are challenged by Jameis Winston as far as work ethic and just mentality goes. Chris Olave, everybody assumes that Olave is going to be your deep guy. And Chris is going to take the top off a lot of defenses. But Chris Olave is one hell of a route runner too. The best route runner in the 2022 draft class, in my opinion. And I watched the receivers extensively coming into this draft. So a good route runner is a good friend of a quarterback very, very quickly. And we already saw the chemistry that Jameis had with Marquez Callaway and Deontay Hardy last year. This is a receiving crew that's going to click very, very quickly, assuming that offensive line gives them time, gives Winston time, that is. And I do expect a bounce back to form from the offensive line. Again, they have to stay healthy. Cesar Ruiz either has to become the Cesar Ruiz that was supposed to be a first-round talent, or Dennis Allen has to have the guts to replace him real quick if he continues to be a human turnstile. But outside of that, I have confidence in this offensive line, provided they stay even reasonably healthy. Again, like we said at the onset of the show, it's going to take some time for these offensive pieces to gel, but I think they're going to do so rather quickly. And this is a potentially a very, very dangerous group when they do.
And just to bounce off of that, for me, the biggest thing I want to see in camp is cohesion. And you have to tip your hat to Jameis Winston for doing what he did and meeting with a lot of those guys down in Florida for 3 days just a couple weeks ago. And to see an old friendly face for Saints fans and Teddy Bridgewater being there as well, I think that's a great step. Because for a lot of these guys, it's the first year they're going to be playing together, the first time they have a full regular offseason. Because even last season, Bob, it was not a regular offseason.
Mm-hmm.
Still, even though it wasn't the same COVID protocols and whatnot, it still wasn't a regular offseason. So the first regular offseason.
Remember, this team had to relocate and lost a preseason game and a whole week of practice, because of the hurricane as well. So, while the other NFL teams had a weird and abbreviated offseason,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the Saints were in even worse shape.
Exactly. And a lot of people forget about that. And so for Jameis to take the initiative to go ahead and do that, that's a big step. But in terms of being voices in the locker room, I'm looking at a guy. Mike Thomas is a quiet leader, right?
Yeah.
He leads by example. Goes out there, he's physical, he's aggressive, he plays with that chip. I'm looking at a guy like Jarvis Landry, who we saw firsthand on Hard Knocks when he was with the Cleveland Browns, being a vocal leader to that wide receiver room. I got to look towards a guy like Landry. When it comes to the offensive line, you got to look to a guy like Ryan Ramczyk, who's now the leader, the veteran guy, and Andrews Pete as well, staying healthy. Those guys have to bring that cohesion across the board. And defensively, it's easy. I mean, you look at your guys and you know your guys. And it's like you said earlier, it's DeMario, it's Cam Jordan, it's Tyrann Mathieu. You have some new pieces, but for the most part, that D-line, those linebackers and those outside corners, and even your slot guys, those guys are staying the same. So I'm not as worried about as the cohesion on the defensive side as I am with the offensive side. And you also have to bring up cohesion with the coaching staff, right? It's brand new for everybody. And I know that's an easy thing to point to. It's an easy thing to go, you got to have chemistry. You got to have cohesion. I mean, you and I wouldn't have a show that we're doing right now if we didn't have chemistry over these years, right? It's easy to say that. But how many times have you not had chemistry with someone, whether it was professionally, whether it was friends, whether it was this, whether it was that? And then
Brandon, I can't answer that. I'm a married man, and my wife's sitting across the room.
Okay, well, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but you guys get what I'm saying. You throw that together with, how many guys are on your training camp roster? 90 guys on your training camp roster, plus the coaching staff, plus the trainers, plus this, plus that. Cohesion's not an easy thing to come by,
right?
And you have to fight for it, and you have to want it. And sometimes you don't have instant chemistry, and you got to put things aside to make sure that you do. And I think the Saints have that DNA in their locker room this season, and they certainly have over the seasons in the past. And even with all the question marks that come, I think this is a Saints team that is going to find that. And you're seeing some guys step up. We just got to see it here over the next couple of weeks. With that, and I said big question marks. Good segue. I don't know if I did that on purpose or not. Should I give myself credit? Let's segue into the biggest questions. Well, we have the last 12 minutes of our show. The biggest question marks coming in to training camp. I think one of them we already touched on was, what is Taysom Hill? We kind of touched on that a little bit. I love referencing that. Was it Gridiron Heights on Bleacher Report? What is Taysom Hill? It was kind of their similar little thing to was it Game of Zones, which is like a Game of Thrones knockoff. But anyway, what is Taysom Hill? We've kind of talked about that. It's we don't really know. I think for me, one of the biggest questions got answered a little bit today as well was, where is Michael Thomas in his recovery? We talked about the Kamara. Is he going to be suspended? Probably not at the beginning of the year, but at some point. So let's stick to running backs. One of my biggest questions for the Saints going into training camp is, who's the third running back? Is it going to be Washington, who's a great special teams player, and he gets his roster spot earned and earns every penny every year because of how great of a special teamer he is? But is he the third running back? And if Ingram were to go down, or God forbid, if Kamara were to go down, who's the next man up?
Yeah, and that's listen, I'm going to be paying a lot closer attention in these preseason games when the backups come in than I am when the starters are on the field. Because not only tonight we're talking about it, but we talked about it with Jordy last week. You pretty much know what you're going to get from this starting lineup. Especially from your stars, from your Pro Bowls and all pros across the board. But running back position, when Kamara takes his 2 or 3 preseason snaps and has a seat, and Ingram has his 2 or 3 carries and has a seat, that's when I'm going to be kind of sliding up to the edge of my seat and seeing who really, if you'll pardon the pun, takes the ball and runs with it. Is it going to be Abram Smith, Ezigbo, Malcolm Brown, Tony Jones? Is he going to capitalize on a solid preseason from last year? That's one of the biggest question marks on this team right now. And none of us know the answer to it. A lot of people, myself included, love Abram Smith. I loved Ezigbo when he was here 2 or 3 years ago. I thought he should have made the team. I like Malcolm Brown, not only at Texas, but with those hated Rams. So I could see him pushing hard for a roster spot. But yeah, I mean, that position, like you said, Brendan, it is not only wide open, but it is also the onus of success is on the shoulders of these guys, because if they don't perform well, you're going to see Dennis Allen and Mickey Loomis go roster hunting, come the middle end of preseason, poaching off other teams' roster cuts, or perhaps even swinging a late training camp trade, something that the Saints are rather famous for. So it's on the shoulders of Smith, Ezigbo, Tony Jones, Malcolm Brown. It's on their shoulders to stop Dennis Allen and Mickey Loomis from doing that. To say to them, no, we can handle this if Kamara needs a breather, or if Kamara gets suspended, or if Mark Ingram just flat out runs out of gas. We can do this. You don't need another running back, but they got to prove it.
Sticking on the offensive side of the ball, receiver was such a weird position for the Saints last year because of injuries and because they weren't able to retain Emmanuel Sanders, even though it was public knowledge that they wanted to. The Saints had, I don't even think that's a debate, they had the worst receiving corps in football last year. It wasn't good. And the numbers back me up on that as well. And now all of a sudden the Saints have one of the more talented receiving corps in the league. Because Mike Thomas is back. They draft Olave, they sign Landry, and you still have Callaway and Hardy and Smith, who are going to be able to fill roles that are better suited for them as sidekicks rather than superheroes. So the question becomes, I name all those guys, who's the odd guy out? Is it Traquan Smith?
Yes.
Where do the Saints look to go at receiver when you go?
Did you freeze on me?
Are we back?
Yeah, I see you, hear you now.
Okay.
You cut out. What was the last thing you said?
Gotcha. Hey, we're still dealing with Wi-Fi issues. How about that? Technology. But I was asking, after going from so untalented or lack of talent to being one of the more talented, who is the odd guy out of this receiving corps? Because all of a sudden the Saints have an abundance of talents there. Do you cut a guy like Traquan Smith? Do you keep him on the roster? And what does that mean for guys like Kawan Baker from last year, who was a late round draft pick, or even an Aesop Winston Jr., who impressed a lot of people?
And the receiver battle is going to be a close one to watch, entertaining to watch all camp. Folks, the Saints rarely keep 6 wide receivers on the active roster. And when they do, the last spot or two is always going to go to a special teamer, or predominantly a special teamer. Having said that, I will say it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. At least one of Deontay Hardy, Marquez Callaway, Traquan Smith, at least one of, or if not two, are not going to be on this roster come season opener. And again, all this is predicated on health. Thomas, Landry, Olave, they all, knock on wood, they all got to stay healthy. Those are your top 3 receivers. Deontay's your kick returner. I don't think he's going anywhere, especially now that Rashid Shaheed is at least going to be out of action for probably, we think, the first couple of weeks of camp. That was going to be Deontay's primary competition as returner. You got to keep Deontay around as your kick returner, and 4th, 5th wide receiver. Another secret weapon for Pete Carmichael on offense too. After that, you got to look at Callaway or Traquan. Traquan's the better blocker. There's no question about that. Callaway is the better route runner, more dependable receiver, and has the better chemistry with Jameis Winston. Is that going to play out in the preseason? Obviously, there's going to be a battle between those two guys. Presumably for number 5. I think the loser, you try to trade, because you hate to see a talent like Callaway or Traquan. And yeah, I said Traquan talent in the same sentence. You hate to have to release a guy like that outright. So I mentioned earlier, that the Saints have become relatively famous for making late training camp or early season trades, maybe for a running back. Well, if you have a surplus at wide receiver, maybe you dangle a Callaway or a Traquan for a team's 3rd, 4th running back. Maybe you get a late round pick out of it, because the Saints don't have a lot of draft picks next year. Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith, they will both of them will not be on this roster come game day. Both of them will not be on this roster come game day. Both of them will not be on this roster come game day. That's just flat out. And at that point, it becomes, which other guy? Is it a Kevin White? I highly doubt it. But a Dejon Dixon, Aesop Winston, who I like a lot, K'Wan Baker. All of those guys are capable and will have to win jobs by special teams. But I give one of those guys if the Saints keep 6 wide receivers into the regular season, and I think it's a possibility that they do, the 6th wide receiver will come from one of those guys.
Let's flip it to the defensive side with our last little bit of time. We talked linebacker last week, and you were really high on Jackson out of App State, being able to fill in and provide that depth. We also talked about the interior of the defensive line that's been a little shaky outside of Big O over the last few years, and Donald Woods, great minds think alike. What are the expectations for the defensive line? And in terms of that training camp battle, who do you look to come out as a winner? Because Shai Tuttle's still a guy that a lot of Saints fans like. They like the potential. They obviously love him for the highlight on Thanksgiving Day a few years ago. But what can we expect? Remember, they also drafted a kid out of Air Force that could play on the interior of the defensive line, and they had some underrated signings in free agency as well.
Yeah, I think Jordan Jackson, the 6th round pick out of Air Force, he's going to get a lot of reps, training camp and preseason reps. He's going to get a good opportunity to earn his job. And I like what the Saints did at defensive tackle this offseason. They didn't make any splashy moves, but I think Kentavious Street, the free agent from San Francisco, I think he's going to surprise a lot of people this year. Maybe not with a Pro Bowl season, but he's going to give this team a lot of reps and strengthen that rotation. Jaleel Johnson, I think he played with the Texans last year, but he played his first 4 years with the Vikings. He's a heck of a run stopper, kind of in that shy tuttle mode. Shy's not going to give you a lot of quarterback pressures, never going to give you a lot of sacks, but he's going to tie up blockers. He's going to get penetration in the backfield against the run, which sort of blows up a lot of plays. That's the kind of player that Jaleel Johnson is. Street, certainly what we've seen from Onyemata and what I think the Saints see out of Jordan Jackson, those are your athletic, dynamic guys, your guys that are going to be strong interior presences, but also have the versatility to move outside on the edge, which is important because as deep as the Saints' edge rusher position is, we also know and have seen Cam Jordan, Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner, Tano Passanio, they all got reps at defensive tackle in obvious passing situations last year. The Saints are going to need that same kind of versatility from Onyemata and Street and maybe Jordan Jackson to move outside and take it, so Ryan Nielsen could take advantage of those blocking matchups up front. And it's important for those younger guys to take full advantage of these early camp reps because Davenport, Passanio are both start. Yeah, Davenport's on the PUP list. Passanio is on the non-football injury list. So they're going to be out of action early in camp. It's going to be on these young guys to really. That's going to be their chance to solidify spots on this roster. That, or if you're talking about a veteran with an outside chance trying to resurrect his career, it's going to be a perfect opportunity for Taco Charlton too. But I look for big contributions from Kentavious Street. I really like Jordan Jackson's film from college, and I'm interested to see what they're going to do early in training camp in the first preseason game or two.
Well, we're about out of time. I don't want to forget about special teams, but I don't really think there's any position battles there. Will Lutz is back. Gillikin is showing the promise of being one of the best punters in the league, and I don't know if they could have asked for a better replacement to Thomas Morstead.
Mm-hmm.
He's been everything he was promised to be and more. But before we go, Bob, and before we tell everybody about all the other wonderful things that we do, I did want to bring up that we want to hear from you guys, the listeners. So head over to Twitter. If you don't follow the Twitter page already, I'll remove this banner real quick. You can see it right here in the bottom below myself at Bayou Blitz Pod. Go ahead and give us a follow over there because we're going to be running some polls throughout the rest of training camp for some topics that you guys want us to talk about, because Bob and I can talk about training camp and whatever we feel like needs to be talked about, but you guys might find it boring or want to hear opinions of other things. And while we love you guys coming in the chats, if we can go ahead and prep an entire show around some of the things you want to hear, that's going to be even better. So look for some of those polls, vote on them. Make sure to let us know what you want to hear from us. And when you're not listening to the podcast or catching up, head over to Saints News Network by typing in saints.media into your search bar. Check out Bob's articles. Well, maybe not this week because Bob, Beach Bum Bob, that's a good nickname for you. Beach Bum Bob, going to be out at the beach. One of you guys roasted me really bad last week. I said I was at the beach and I just got Brendan. You got no sun at all. I don't.
It wasn't me, but
I don't know. Is it the LED light? Do I look darker now? But nonetheless, Bob's going to be at the beach. So John Hendricks is going to be reporting live every day from Metairie training camp. Kyle Mose is going to head out there and catch up with him at some point as well. I'll be here to talk a little bit fantasy football with you guys. If you guys haven't already drafted, those drafts are coming up really soon. And last year was really tough to do anything Saints related with fantasy because outside of Alvin Kamara, who was there to really go with? This year, there's a lot of options, and I have to be able to provide you guys some great info on that. So we're looking forward to that. D, more suntan lotion, bro? I don't know. You guys, give me your tips. I need to be tan. We'll try again next year, I promise. But nonetheless, those are some things. I see John's already said 2011 Saints, so John Butler on board. Our good friend John Butler.
Yeah,
always supporting us. We will definitely do a podcast just about the 2011 Saints team, and I'll be able to show off one of my favorite pieces in my collection when I get my backdrop back. Bob's seen it. I won't ruin it for you guys, but it's a pretty cool piece of the 2011 NFL season. So, Bob, with all that said, along with going and voting on Twitter polls on Bayou Blitz Twitter, how do people find your Twitter, and what kind of polls are you going to put up while you're on vacation?
Folks, first of all, I want to thank everybody that tuned in tonight. I know it's been kind of helter-skelter the last couple of days. But we ask of you again. We love you for your support, but we ask you to relay our show, talk about our show to your friends, to your family, to other Saints fans and other groups. Promote this, because this is your show. I call you guys Bayou Blitz family for a reason. This is your podcast as much as it belongs to Brendan and myself. So help promote us. Like Brendan said, both of our DMs are constantly open. We love to hear your ideas, your suggestions, your critiques, and just your overall debates. That's what helps make our shows. That's what helps set up our shows for future dates. And we're going to bring you a whole bunch of great guests. It's on me tonight. I had a couple guests lined up, but failure to communicate on my part, sort of threw a monkey wrench in that. But as Brendan said, I'll be, for those of you that do follow me or want to follow me, I can be followed on Facebook, Bob Rose, over on Twitter at BobbyR2613. We do have our own Bayou Blitz Twitter page. We do have our own Bayou Blitz Facebook group. One is very, very interactive as well. So if you're not already a member, please join that. As I mentioned at the onset of the show, and as Brendan backed up, we're both contributing writers for the Saints News Network and Fan Nation, which is part of SI.com. I won't be writing any training camp articles over the next week because I will be at the beach, but I will be doing my weekly segment on the Jordy Haltberg show on Tuesday. And you guys know Jordy from last week. Hopefully you tune into his show every day. But he helped kick off our initial Bayou Bliss episode last week. And yeah, I know, John, I'm going raspy already, but I will be doing my Jordy Haltberg spot next Tuesday, and I will also be doing our Bayou Blitz podcast with the beach as my backdrop next week. As far as polls and things that will be going on during the week, I promise not to horrify you guys too much with shirtless beach pics or anything like that. But maybe more wholesome pics of the family. I'm not going to say an OnlyFans Bob account, but if you got ideas, I'm all ears.
No comment. For myself, you can follow me on Twitter at BT Boylan. That's my Instagram page as well. Like Bob said, you can follow all of our Saints work at the Saints News Network. Just type in saints.media in your search bar, or find us on Twitter, and it's in both of our bios. I'll self-promote myself as well. You can see above me my production company, Bottom of the Mug Productions. If you didn't catch it over the last 2 years and you're a basketball person, by all means, check out the award-winning documentary that I produced, The Dancing Bulldogs. We'd certainly appreciate that even 2 years later. It was a really fun film to be able to produce and work on. And we are just excited that Saints ball is back next week. We are supposed to have a full crew of Saints News Network guys. I have Kyle T. Mosley here. I have John Hendricks live from Metairie here. So please bring a bag full of questions, because both those guys are going to have so much knowledge. And while Bob may fall asleep during the show with catching all that sun that I didn't catch at the beach last couple weeks ago, we're going to have so much information, new information, and being able to pick the brains of everyone that's been involved with the Saints News Network over the years. So that's Bob Rose. I'm Brendan Boylan. Give us a follow if you haven't already. Great hanging out with you guys tonight. Thank you so much for supporting our show. Bob, I know I'll talk to you, but soak up some sun for me, and we'll see you guys same place, same time here for the Bayou Blitz next week, episode 3 of the Revival podcast here in 2022. We'll see you then.
Take care.